entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
This week's review is a follow-up to my latest discussion of the week video. Now, in that video, I addressed the question of, is Superman irrelevant? And I discussed it as it pertains to our modern society and our modern culture. This film addresses the same question, but within the context of the fictional world itself. So, without further ado, let's take a look at Superman versus the Elite. Superman vs. the Elite is the 2012 direct-to-video animated film given to us courtesy of Warner Premiere, Warner Brothers Animation, and DC Comics. It is an adaptation of the What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way story from Action Comics number 775, published in March 2001, written by Joe Kelly, who also wrote the screenplay for this film. Now, in this film, Superman meets a team of metahumans known as the Elite, and at first he believes them to be allies in his fight for justice, but soon he discovers that their definitions of justice are two completely different things. The Elite reveal themselves to be a group of vigilantes who have no problem playing judge, jury, and executioner for anyone that they believe is making the world a worse place. Now Superman is pitted against this team of individuals, but their fight is not just simply a fight of good versus evil. Their ideologies and philosophies are at stake, and essentially they're fighting for the public consciousness of the entire world. So now I'm going to give my thoughts on the overall story and the writing of the film, and I think that this is a very solid story. I think it's a very solid story. I think it's well adapted, and to say that the film clocks in at just over 75 minutes, I think it's very well paced. What I appreciate about the story, once again, with the themes at which it tackles, with the topics that it brings up, it very much reminds me of Kingdom Come, which is my favorite DC story, because in the film we are introduced to a group of metahumans who once again have no problem with killing. And so to say that you have the conflict between the new age heroes, who that's how they define heroism and that's how they define justice, versus Superman, who is the old school traditionalist superhero, that was very much at the core of that Kingdom Come story. That's what set the main conflict of that story into motion. And so to see that done in a different light, in a different perspective, with some different characters and whatnot, I really appreciate it. And once again, going into the theme that was the discussion of the week video, and it's also the theme that this film addresses, the notion that Superman is irrelevant. Now, in the film, they're talking about Superman as it pertains to him actually being a superhero. So with him doing his job. Why? Because one of the problems that presents itself in the film is that Superman doesn't kill his villains. So when Atomic Skull escapes from prison and he does take the life of that politician, you see it reflected in his son. You see the emotion, you see that response, you see that action that he would like to see Superman take. And once it gets out to the public, once it's shared in the media, and then of course once the Elite gets a hold of it, they get to use that to their advantage. They get to use that against Superman, to play that against him. And once again, it brings into question, Superman's morals, his ethics, his stance, all of those things being questioned on that grand of a scale as we see it in the UN, as we see it in international news. I thought that was done really well. Another thing I really liked about the writing in the film was the dialogue itself. I was surprised when revisiting this film how much witty banter there was. And I'm talking about between Clark and Lois. Of course, Manchester Black has some of the best dialogue in the film, probably the best dialogue in the film. And of course, with him and his compatriots in the Elite, there is a lot of very witty banter in this film. A lot of jokes that I thought were pretty good. The one thing though, my one complaint about the dialogue in the film, and that's all the sexual humor that we do with the character of Pam. I didn't really care for it. I thought it was somewhat juvenile. At first, I didn't mind it because, the whole her flirting with Superman and, the whole playing coy and whatnot, that I thought was somewhat charming. But once we get to about the second time she starts doing that, yeah, it gets very tired very soon. Next, I want to discuss the characters and some of the voice acting performances in the film. By far, I would say that probably the breakthrough performance and the breakthrough character of this film is Manchester Black. What they do with that character, with his backstory, with what we find out about quote-unquote backstory, and just the role that that character plays in the film and the way he operates. I mean, Manchester Black, every time he's on screen, he steals the show. And the performance by Robin Atkin Downes, I think he does a very good job with that. George Newbern returns as Superman in this film. Of course, George Newbern, he was the voice of Superman in Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. He does a very good job in this film as well. And with this story particularly, to say, especially once we get into the third act, how dark of a turn the story takes, it was really cool to see Newbern take on this take of Superman. So once again, kudos for that. Now, the one character and the one performance I would probably be the most critical of was Lois and her voice actor, Pauley Perrette. Here's my issues with Lois. Now, first and foremost, I think that Lois was written well enough. The fact that she knows Superman's identity from the start of the film, I love, and is actually the best thing about her in this film. Why? Because with her knowing Superman's identity, we don't have to do the whole, keeping the secret away from Lois, her trying to find out, we don't have to do any of that. And essentially, when we start this film, her and Clark are already a couple. So Lois gets to play the supportive girlfriend in this film. Now, what's cool about that is Superman has a confidant. He has someone he can confide in. So we do get to get a lot more intimate with him in this film. Lois does play a perfect vehicle for that, especially since we only get one scene with Ma and Pa Kent. She's written well enough in that regard. And as I mentioned before, her and Clark have a lot of witty banter. The fact that it's that boyfriend-girlfriend banter, I really appreciate it. But these are the two complaints I have for her. Number one, for the way the character is written, Lois doesn't get enough to do. As important as the role she played in this film, she doesn't get enough to do. And why? Because the scope of the conflict is just so large in this film. But the role that she is able to play as an investigative reporter, looking into the elite's history, looking into their backstories, looking into British intelligence, she does play her role well. I partly just wish she could have had a little bit more screen time. Now, the part of me that wish she didn't have more screen time, and that has to go into the actual voice acting performance. And Pauley Perrette, while I appreciate the effort, I don't think she exhibited enough range with Lois, and that could have to do with how Lois is written and the role she plays in the film. We don't get enough emotion. We don't get to see enough range with that performance. She is kind of playing the same tone throughout the entire film, regardless of the situation, regardless of what's happening on camera. It's the same tone, Lois. So that's the only real criticism I have about that. Now I'm going to take this opportunity to address the animation and the music in the film. But first, the animation. Now, the best thing about the animation by far is the backgrounds. This film has some beautiful backgrounds. What we do with the cityscapes, I think, is very well done. And with the alien ship, Bonnie's design, her interior, all of that, I think, looks really cool. The one thing I will be critical of in the animation, though, is the questionable character designs. And what I mean by that is Superman's design is really questionable because he's so big, he's so bulky, almost sort of out of place. And I don't know if that was done, on purpose to make him, more alien or whatnot, because compared to some of the other human male characters, they aren't drawn the same way. And like Manchester Black and some of the members of the elite, yeah, they're designed a little bit more similar to Superman in terms of the way that the line art is done. There is some likeness there, but I also understand why their designs are done the way they are, because it's meant to contrast those characters and play into their personalities and their abilities. So it makes a little bit more sense that they would be so stylized, but I don't understand why Superman is. And what's really odd is if you look at like the female characters in the film, most of them are designed the same, including Lois. It's really weird. I'm not talking about like they look exactly the same, but when you talk about the way in which the line art is done, the way in which the coloring is done and the shading and whatnot, they look very similar. All you gotta do is just swap out the outfits and the hair, and I mean, they're almost working off of a template with that. So I thought that was kind of questionable. And so finally, I'm going to go ahead and discuss the music. And the music I thought is pretty good. It's about on par with some of the other DC animated films. I really dug the prologue score though. I thought that was pretty awesome. And of course, the main theme, it is very much Superman. It's very much in that same tradition. So I can appreciate that. By and large, the music holds up pretty well. And so that's going to go ahead and conclude this week's review. I want to thank you all for joining me again this week. And please, in the comments below, feel free to share your thoughts on this film, share your thoughts on some of these characters. And if you did, in fact, read the original story, please feel free to share your thoughts there. If you like this review, thumb it up. Share it with other fans of the film and other people you think might get a kick out of it. And if you have yet to do so, don't forget to subscribe to the OAW Entertainment YouTube channel. And don't forget to click that little bell icon so that you'll be up to date on the latest notifications and uploads. And finally, if you have yet to do so, consider becoming a patron of the OAW Entertainment YouTube channel at patreon.com/OAW. Link will be in the description box below. And with that being said, this has been Larry Williams, OAW Editor-in-Chief. I'm signing off, and until next time, peace.